Why are some of the wealthiest countries on Earth, in terms of natural resources, also some of the poorest? Think about it. Nations sitting on mountains of gold, diamonds, and oil, yet their people struggle. Is this just centuries of bad luck, a string of poor decisions, or is something else going on? What if the blueprint for today's global inequality was drawn up hundreds of years ago? We're going to investigate the explosive claim that the British Empire is a key cause of modern poverty. This isn't just about waving flags and drawing lines on a map. This is about centuries of economic policies that were designed to extract wealth and engineer dependency, leaving a legacy that the world is still grappling with today. When we think of the British Empire, we usually picture redcoats and vast maps. But at its heart, the empire wasn't a political project. It was an economic one. It was a machine, ruthlessly efficient, and built for one primary purpose: to funnel the world's wealth into Britain. The logic was brutally simple. Colonies provide the raw materials for cheap, and then they're forced to buy back Britain's expensive finished goods. Nowhere is this clearer than in India. Before the British took control, India's economy was a global powerhouse, making up an estimated 23% of the world's total GDP. By the time the British packed their bags in 1947, that number had crashed to just 3%. How does that happen? One controversial study by economist Utsa Patnaik estimates that Britain systematically drained wealth equivalent to over £9 trillion from India between 1765 and 1938. While historians debate the exact figure, the consensus is that the drain of wealth was staggering. This wasn't trade, it was a hostile takeover, and this same pattern played out across the world. In Africa and the Caribbean, resources like cocoa, sugar, and diamonds were stripped out to power Britain's industrial revolution. This left these places with economies that were dangerously reliant on a single commodity. All the wealth that was generated didn't go to build local schools, roads, or hospitals. It was shipped off to London, financing Britain's rise, while locking poverty into the very foundation of the colonies. But it wasn't enough to just take what was there. The empire's masterstroke was to systematically dismantle local industries to wipe out any competition. Before the British, India wasn't just a place with resources, it was a world leader in manufacturing, famous for its high-quality textiles. To kill this industry, Britain waged economic warfare. It slapped crippling tariffs of 70 to 80% on Indian textiles being sold in Britain, while flooding the Indian market with cheaper, machine-made cloth from Manchester, often with zero import tax. There are even accounts of British authorities physically destroying the looms of Indian weavers to speed up the process. While some of these stories are debated by historians, the economic result is not. It was a catastrophic deindustrialization. Skilled weavers and artisans who had been part of a thriving industry for generations were suddenly jobless, forced into farming just to survive. In a few decades, India was transformed from a global exporter of finished textiles into an importer of British cloth and an exporter of raw cotton to feed the very mills that had put them out of business. This wasn't an accident. It was a strategy. By locking colonies into the role of raw material suppliers, it crushed innovation and created a cycle of dependency that many nations are still trying to break free. Perhaps the most brutal legacy of imperial economic policy was its role in famine. The Great Famine of 1876 and the Bengal Famine of 1943 weren't just natural disasters, they were man-made catastrophes, made infinitely worse by British policy. During the Bengal Famine, which killed around 3 million people, there wasn't even a major food shortage from drought. The crisis was triggered by British wartime policies. As the Japanese army advanced, the British confiscated huge amounts of rice and thousands of local boats, fearing they would fall into enemy hands, all while they continued exporting food grains from India. So, while millions of Bengalis starved, food was being shipped out of the country to feed Britain and its armies. This wasn't just incompetence. It was a deliberate choice. After an earlier famine was successfully managed with large-scale relief efforts, the official in charge was slammed by London for spending too much money. For later famines, the official policy was to hold back on relief to save money. The message from the top was chillingly clear. The financial health of the empire was more important than the lives of its subjects. So, let's go back to the big question. Did the British Empire cause modern poverty? When you lay out the evidence, the picture is hard to ignore. This wasn't just a matter of benign rule that went a bit wrong. We're talking about the systematic extraction of trillions in wealth, the deliberate destruction of industries to create captive markets, and a cold, calculated approach. So, let's go back to the big question. Did the British Empire cause modern poverty? Let's discuss below in the comments section.